With the recent reports and massive changes in the finance industry brought on by the Royal Commission, I'm going to be presenting an economic forecast on the supply and demand of financial advice, in light of changes that could have effect over the next 10 years. So firstly, what are the major aspects to financial advice that make it valuable? According to the Royal Commission background report, the major services provided are superannuation and retirement planning, loan and investment advice, self-managed superannuation fund advice, and tax advice. The Productivity Commission noted in 2016, Australia's financial planning sector was estimated to be worth $4.6 billion in revenue, yet it was also estimated that it has probably declined slightly since, due to the Royal Commission's impact. To give a sense of the demand currently out there for financial advice, a study from the Productivity Commission also revealed that 48% of Australians have unmet financial advice needs. Whilst only 2.3 million people received financial advice that year, less than 10% of the population. So this is also in light of a survey in 2017 showing that 1 in 3 Australians are financially stressed, with damaging effects on mental and physical health as well as social relationships. Before going into the forecast, it is important to mention that the demand in this industry derives from the consumers of people and the supply is the number of abled and licensed bodies to give advice. Here we have the demand curve, which shows that the service is price elastic, i.e. quantity demanded is driven by price. Where the supply curve crosses is the point of equilibrium where price demanded equals the quantity demanded. To get an idea of the major drivers of the demand curve, I'll be covering 3 main determinants of why people need an advisor. First, complexity of the processes, such as opening accounts, lodging buy and sell orders, and using appropriate products can lead to a higher demand. Some investments, particularly alternative investments, can only be bought through an advisor due to their complex nature of returns. As the income of individuals increases, they may have more disposable income they would like to invest and or have an advisor to manage for them. Third, as people's goals for their future increasingly get larger, they may seek for advice on how to invest in more complex investments to attain larger profits that can help them buy that second house or luxury car. And fourthly, as legislation becomes more complex, particularly around self-managed super funds and superannuation, it makes more sense to find someone who knows it well rather than spending countless hours learning it yourself. As legislation continues to change and the types of investments become more complex, such as cryptocurrencies being the newest on the field, we could expect to see an increase in demand for financial advice services in the future. This would cause a demand shift in the curve to the right, pushing the new equilibrium to a higher price. The major determinants of supply have been changing recently, causing big changes to the industry. Firstly, the cost of compliance in light of the Royal Commission have increased substantially, leading to smaller profits and less reason to provide financial advice. Just in the last week, we saw that on the news that Westpac is moving away from financial advice due to compliance costing too much and made over 900 advisors redundant. Second, the new education requirements brought in on the 15th of March 2017 meant advisors needed to have a relevant bachelor's degree, which also led to a massive decrease in the number of advisors in the industry. Third, we have substitutes. Robo-advice is increasingly becoming more complex and may create some large changes to the industry in the next 10 years due to its potentially infinite supply. Over the next 10 years, there are already talks of making a master's degree the standard requirement and also a call for higher regulation and compliance. This would further decrease the supply, leading to a shift of the supply curve to the left, also leading to a higher price. However, for the supply of advisors overall, we have seen an increase over the last 10 years. In 2009, there were only 18,000 advisors compared to 2018, where there were over 25,000, an increase of 41%, which would have shifted the curve to the right, creating a lower price. For the future of advice in the next 10 years, we can expect some bigger changes in a few key areas. Firstly, education requirements may continue to increase, building the entry barriers and shortening the supply. Second, legislation changes. As explained earlier, they never make things more simple. Thirdly, compliance increase, leading to higher costs of business. And fourth, more complex investments such as cryptocurrencies, hedge funds, and algorithm-based strategies that clients would want exposure to inside their portfolios may increase over the next 10 years, with millennials becoming a larger portion of the investors. And fifth, lastly, the impact of robo-advice, potentially servicing millions of clients at a far cheaper cost. Some of the expectations of robo-advice in the next 10 years include being able to integrate with other asset classes, handle individual securities, ladder bond portfolios, consider low tax basis holdings, allocate illiquid positions, and help clients understand their portfolios. From the points presented so far, I can draw the following forecast that the continuing increase of complexity in the investments and laws surrounding them will create a larger demand for financial advice in the future. The increasing cost of compliance and education requirements will also shorten the supply, creating a new equilibrium at a higher price. However, that may be to see a human advisor. The impact of robo-advice may change the scope of financial advice, creating two separate products or services: the human advice for complex matters and high net worth clients, and a more general, less complex and cheap advice product through robo-advice, available to many people, dictated by S3. Although in the last 10 years many unforeseen events have impacted the financial industry, we can't say for certain that this forecast will be entirely accurate for the next 10, but we can draw the following conclusions. As complexity of processes and investment options increase, so will demand, and as compliance costs increase and education standards also increase, the supply of investors will decrease. And lastly, as robo-advice becomes more complex, supply will be increased over certain matters. So this concludes my report on the forecast of financial advice over the next 10 years. Thank you for listening.